Hi, welcome, Tier 1 Healthcare. I've got a great team ready to talk with you guys today. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to spend some time with us. My name is Dustin Shell. I'm an Innovation Director at Tier 1 Healthcare, and really excited to spend the next half hour with you talking about moving the mountain. If you haven't heard of us, that's okay. It's a new merger between two incredible companies. Compass Clinical, who has 40 years experience doing compliance and regulatory work, interim leadership placement, as well as process improvement and standing up new ways of working within organizations. You combine that with Tier 1 Performance, who's been in this world of people and performance, activating strategies through change management, talent development, leadership development, org design, you name it with talent, we got it. And we get a really unique, powerful offering for healthcare. And we're excited to be in the presence of Jackie and Jenny talking about moving the mountain. They are on the front lines working with executives all the way down. I've seen them do it, scrubbing the floor, getting things ready. These guys are incredible, humble servant leaders who also know their stuff. And so, guys, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Sure. So thanks a lot, Dustin. So my name's Jenny McKinney. I've got about 20 years background in process improvement, and I have to tell you, I'm absolutely passionate about the topic that we're going to talk about today. I have spent my career, because I love it, working in the environment to create it for frontline employees to be empowered to make change. Multiple areas of experience, but the last several years in healthcare, which is ultimately my passion.
Absolutely. Hey everyone, Jackie Luchsinger. Thank you so much for having us today. My background is on the clinical side. I've had the opportunity, if you will, for the last many years to not only be on the clinical side, but performance improvement, much like Jenny, informatics, and really pulling that in. And really my passion, Dustin, that I bring to this topic is that we have to take a look at our healthcare systems and find ways to allow our frontline people to be successful despite some of the challenges of our healthcare systems.
That's right. And we're talking about moving the mountain, and it's a perfect time because healthcare is actually in a really interesting place where there's so many challenges that we face. So to get us started talking about this, why don't we build some vocabulary around what are the big mountains that you guys see healthcare leaders are facing right now?
Yeah. Let me take that one. Yeah. Okay. I think the three things, Dustin, really are quality. From a quality perspective, what are the things that are driving the bottom line, right? We get penalized if our quality isn't good. Patient experience. Patients have a choice where to come for care. If we don't give them a good experience, they're not going to come to our institution. And I think operational efficiency, we've seen that quite a bit, and that continues to be a top issue and a top mountain that people really have to climb.
Well, especially when it's tied to how we're compensated.
Right.
It's an imperative.
Right. Exactly.
So if those are the mountains we're facing, the operations, the patient experience, and the quality and safety, let's start talking about some of the common barriers we see across all of those mountains. What are the barriers leaders are facing when you think across those three?
It's interesting because when you think when you talk about moving mountains and you say, well, what are they? And we can say, oh, they're the top three. And we rattle off these words. We say quality, patient experience, operational efficiency. It sounds so simple. It sounds so basic. It's three words. It seems easy. Why can't we figure this out? And the reality is that you take any one of those, and there are so many components to be able to fix that. And so if you just take quality, you could have 50 quality metrics in a hospital. Of those 50 metrics, each metric could have 5 different departments that have to do something to positively impact that metric. So it becomes very, very complex. So I think that's the first thing to know about why they sort of struggle with this piece of it is the complexity. I think the other piece of it is, so you get into this environment where there's multiple departments, there's multiple units. Healthcare is very broad from that perspective. Some are within your control, some are out. But what happens is there's a lack of alignment. So what happens is the front line, the nursing unit may or may not be working on something in a way that's data-based, et cetera, to affect a larger KPI from, that the president or CEO is focused on. But even more than that, sometimes these departments or units have goals and strategies that are competing with one another, that are against one another. So you add that, and then you add this third component that I think is just significant, and this is absolutely not limited to healthcare, and that is the rate and pace of change is uncontrollable, is what it feels like to employees right now. And I think part of that rate and pace is because we have things today that we need to fix. So we work on them, we put teams on them, we fix them. tomorrow, they're not fixed. So when they're not fixed tomorrow, now we have the things we need to do tomorrow. So we're focused on those, but we're still working on the things from yesterday because they never got done. So when you put all three of those things together, I think it becomes, it almost paralyzes leaders when they get ready to address those mountains and they're not sure where to start and how to break that apart.
So I'm guessing we're not saying anything new here. I'm guessing we're getting lots of head nods out there. Like, oh, preach it.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
So I now I want to kind of shift it because, you know, as consultants, we get this really cool perspective when we're in several organizations across lots of different states across the nation, you in size and scale and focus, we see themes. And I think that's an interesting place for us to speak to next. Let's start getting a little tactical on, so how would you hone in on where are the real opportunity or barriers that we can speak to and really start making a difference here?
Right, and why is it so hard?
Right.
Why is this so hard? It
Why?
doesn't seem like it should be that hard. So I think, you know, and I'll start, Jenny, maybe you can chime in. You know, I think there's two pieces. There's a transparency piece that, you know, we have this changed language and we have this this language that the front line hears, but it doesn't always translate to what the senior executives mean. So I think we have a transparency issue around what do we actually mean? And then I think, you know, we talk about this a lot, but I think there's really a lack of application of the tools, the training, the things that we give our front line, and how do we actually help them implement the change? And then how do we help them sustain that change? Do you think?
Oh, absolutely. So just take that and flip it a little bit. So if you talk about transparency, so that's from the senior leadership team, from the CEO or president to the unit clerk on the unit to the EBS employee that's cleaning a room, creating that environment where they're all sort of working towards the same purpose and goal, they're aligned. Then you get into what we refer to as frontline drivers. So for any role in an organization, if you can get into the frontline driver, then what you can do is you can tell people what behavior they need to take today to be aligned in those goals. And so that's one of them, I think, that frontline driver piece. And that helps with the transparency, et cetera. And then the other thing that's just very specific is a very tactical approach to coaching once you've done an implementation. So if you've done a training classroom, if you've done a training that's PowerPoint, if you did the training 3 weeks ago, you can still go out and dig into this coaching component. It is so significant. And so those are the two things, if I would just sort of distill that. It's frontline driver for transparency and the coaching tool for the application from classroom to real life for the employee, for the frontline.
That's wonderful. And you know, I've only recently been digging into the healthcare world. And before that, what you're saying resonates so much with most organizations, especially on this coaching piece. There's a real challenge in the gap between how we're oriented, how we're trained, and then we actually go out and we do the work, and now all of a sudden it's up to that frontline leader to actually train that person the way that the work actually happens. There's a disconnect, and so we see that in lots of different industries. And so I love this like practical thing about coaching as the sustainment, because it'll force you back into the training. And like, if we're training them wrong, let's start closing that gap. So I love that. And then the other one, you threw in a little word there, frontline drivers. I'm learning in the healthcare, we love our words. And so we used a word here, frontline driver. Can you guys make that a little bit more concrete for what we mean and maybe an example of what it looks like?
Sure. And we love our words and we love our acronyms, and we are very proud of them. So we'll just leave that there. And maybe other industries too, but healthcare for sure. So when you think about a frontline driver, the thing that I want you to sort of think through and remember is that number one, it's evidence and data based. So it's not something that is the squeakiest wheel. So that's the number one thing, is it's evidence, it's data based. And then the second piece that's really important is it's a specific behavior that the employee can take at that moment in time, very real time, to behave differently so that it affects that lagging indicator or that outcome, that key performance indicator. So truly defining that and understanding. The other thing to remember about the frontline driver, I think that's really important, is frontline driver doesn't just mean frontline as in the person that touches the patient. anyone can have a frontline driver. A president needs to understand what his frontline drivers are to affect change, because that's different than what a supply chain clerk's frontline driver is. So that's the first thing, is to just define frontline driver. And then I can go a little bit more tactical, because we like to dig in a little bit.
This is your opportunity. Geek out.
Right. This is where our passion is. So if you take one just really basic, so in healthcare, speaking of acronyms, so it's pretty common as a quality metric that you would talk about a CLABSI. So my clinical partner would tell you that's a central line associated bloodstream infection that can happen. And so there's a lot of evidence around these quality metrics. And so if you use the evidence, then it says that there's a couple of things that's evidence-based that you would do to address a CLABSI. Well, one of those is CHG bath compliance. So that would actually become the frontline driver on the unit that the nursing staff would talk about during this huddle process that we'll talk about in a little bit, so that they know why they're doing that bath compliance. And so, or why that bath compliance matters, what does it roll up to? And that's so much more impactful than just telling them, we need to be zero harm. Well, I don't understand what I'm supposed to do as a nurse to be zero harm. I'm working hard, I'm doing all those right things. So that would be kind of a basic example of a clinical one. If you wanted to talk, and really you can do this in any area and just start asking yourself some questions. So it's what can your employees do to affect change for the outcomes you're being held accountable to. So another one would be, if you look at patient progression across the system, so that's how we're moving a patient through, and you want to measure that. So you would say the key performance indicator might be their length of stay. We need to control how long people are in the hospital. They shouldn't be in there indefinitely. That's not good. And so if you say to look at that, for radiology, they might say, well, I don't understand how I impact patient progression and average length of stay. I didn't even know what those words were 2 days ago. Well, if radiology looks at it, people that are in the hospital get tests, and they might get an MRI or a CT. Well, your frontline driver would be that your MRI tests are completed the same day that they're ordered. That absolutely is something that the frontline MRI tech can control, about having the conversation. Did we get them completed, and understanding why, if not, and using a huddle process we're going to talk about to solve for that. So those are just a couple of examples, and we could spend just saying the rest of the day talking about those, but
Thank you for
for the restraint.
Yeah, exactly. It was well done. So just to make sure I'm tracking, and we're all tracking here. So we're talking about moving the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
So here's how this ends up. So we declare this big KPI. We're trying to get patient progression throughput or something like that. We got to figure this out. Right. And what you're saying is there's a behavior or an action someone can take on the front line to make a difference on that big KPI. Now, there's a big gap between in a boardroom saying KPI and on the front line changing the behavior. And that's a really messy process. People are so messy. There's so many reasons we do or don't do things. And what I think is really cool is you guys, and this is kind of getting to the meat of this conversation, you guys have been perfecting a system, a model, an operating system, a structure, whatever you want to call it, to work with and through your people, not up and down, but across the organization to start making a difference. Can you guys tell us a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. And I think we have a graphic up right now. It should look like a bunch of cogs. And, there's kind of a reason for that, because, your frontline staff need a way to funnel and escalate those issues to resolution. So Jenny's example about the CHG BAS, they need a way to escalate the issue that they found, right? So there's not just one person that has a frontline driver. So what this really depicts, and what you should take away from this, is that the system we help organizations put in place, Dustin, is that it's an operating model. So it's an operating model in that it's a tiered structure, and it's a way for the frontline to be able to escalate their issues to the middle management, which are your managers, your directors, those people who can help you solve that problem if you can't. And then if those people can't, then we have what we call a third huddle, or a tier 3 huddle, where the senior leadership team gets involved. So those very maybe egregious things that middle management team just can't do, and you need your leadership power and your horsepower to get it done. That is a powerful model. And if you'll take a look at the depiction as well, it provides an immediate feedback loop back to your front line, so that they know exactly that my concern was heard. They heard me when I said, I can't do my job because I don't have X. And the senior leadership helped solve that. And I got immediate feedback through this process as well. So the speed of it, the beauty of it is really that it's efficient. It looks very simple. It's really not. It's all human based. And so it does get a little messy, and we're not great at it at first, right? We have to practice, we have to coach it, to Jenny's point. So, but it's a great model, and we call it our operating system.
Now, I just want to pause on this for a second, because this feels kind of different than the way I've heard some of this play out, especially when you think about the way metrics can typically be used as like a way to punish or to control, or maybe I've even heard the whack-a-mole game of like, focus over here, then focus over here, and even people feeling like they're not even heard, and so they hide behaviors and they make these workarounds. Speak to like the experience of the people on the front line, how this changes things for them.
Sure. I think we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge in healthcare, just in general, that healthcare workers will not fail. The patient will absolutely get taken care of. And so they will find a way to do what needs to be done. Incredibly servant-based industry. The challenge is that when we don't give them the ability to be empowered and to problem solve and to rise up the barriers to giving that great care, they're going to find workarounds. So you have to be very cautious and cognizant of this huddle model that is not it's not a check off. So it's not a, do we have a huddle check? It has to be very human based, in that the conversation has to be very specific and scripted. And so if you have a huddle today, or you define one tomorrow, and the conversation goes something like, we go with the CHG bath, and it says something like, so team, you didn't hit compliance yesterday, and we need to hit compliance, and so you need to make sure today that you hit the compliance of that to hit 100%. That's very different than what we would ask and recommend as part of our operating model. And so what we're looking for is a conversation where you train the leader to say, so one of the goals that we have is CHG bath compliance, and when we look at that, we know that's the way that we're going to make sure that we reduce CLAPSIs in our organization, which is so important. So you guys, I saw last night, we only hit 85%. So talk me through, team, what happened? So this is taking place during a huddle. So usually twice a day in a nursing huddle, say 6:45 a.m., 6:45 p.m. You've got your frontline employees there. And so what has happened is I've said as the leader, I need you to execute on this. I need you to do this. I've now told you what the goal is, the big KPI. I've told you your frontline driver. I've told you how you can control it. And I've said, I'm looking at it and I'm measuring it, it's not a stick mentality. It's not to beat you with it. Instead, it's and I want to know how I can help you. What's preventing you from being able to do that? So then they'll say things like, well, interestingly enough, there weren't any wipes on the unit. When we called, we found out there was an outage, or, there was no stock for those, or I couldn't do it because of X, Y, Z, this, that, the other. And suddenly they're giving you the greatest gift they could, which is feedback. And it gives you the ability to then problem solve. And so you may be able to solve it in that group and say, as a leader, I got that, or I didn't know that, we can fix that. And it may be something that then you have to sort of roll back a little bit, and you have to take that up to that next level huddle that Jackie spoke about. But that human component where they feel heard, they feel empowered, they can exact change every single day with every single patient that they take care of. It is the most powerful thing. And I think that's where I just stay so passionate about it.
I am getting goosebumps, by the way. and I've actually seen this in action. It's a powerful thing, not just the transformation of like the work that's done, but the way a leader feels when they all of a sudden feel like they're stepping into a leadership role. It's actually really cool. So let's say that you're a leader interested in this idea. You're excited about the huddle framework. You're interested in this idea of frontline drivers. You guys have actually put together a bit of a toolkit for us for these leaders. We're going to give access to everybody on the call here today after this webinar. Can you give us a sense? You got three tools here. Why don't you go ahead? Can you map us out what those tools are and how they could start thinking about them?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so you're going to see on the screen something called a journey map. So just let's talk big picture. This can be used through the lens of a CEO, a COO. This can be a director. You can use this with a frontline employee. And so what you're looking at here is the overall view of this journey that we've talked about. So we talked about a lot of things. You'd have data, evidence-based to create frontline drivers, to create huddles. Well, it's a journey to get there. And this map tells you what does it take to get to this plan, enable, transform, and sustain model. And so use this to kind of say, where am I in the journey? How mature or not am I in the process? So that's the number one tool that I would say just use as a leader, kind of as a reference point of where you are and what does this vision look like. It's important for people to know where they're going so they can understand where they are. The second tool that I think is really important is the one that Jackie spoke to. And so that's the gears, that's the huddle infrastructure. And so when you start to look at that, we're going to pull that one up for you as well. And when you look at those gears and that structure, then what begins to happen is you begin to understand how the front line gets empowered. They're giving you the gift of feedback. They're giving you the gift of real barriers. And then that goes, and it's either handled with the leaders or it goes to the middle management up to SLT if it needs to be. So that's the second tool. The third tool is the coaching standard work. And I cannot stress enough just how important I think that this is to really take at that next level. So I think a lot of people do training as a solution, but what I don't think they do is understand how that's applied when they leave the room. And so what we're going to pull up, it's kind of a Word document. This will be available as part of the webinar as well. And what this is it's the tool and the standard work by which you would be very prescriptive on creating the group of high priority of who are you going to go coach the day after the training? What are you going to coach them on? It helps the coach know what to ask, what to pull out, what to tease out of the huddle, how to give feedback to the leader. But one thing that I think we need to understand is that leaders naturally, it's happening everywhere, may not be great facilitators, and they don't always feel good standing in front of a crowd of their employees. That's not comfortable for them. But if you don't ever go out and see the reality of their process and you leverage a tool like this, you're not going to know that. So those are really the three kind of tools that I think that they're going to have available to them that are just we're passionate about.
And I think, Jen, to add to that, Jenny, I think the coaching standard work, we have had such success with that with our clients because they've really not thought about, Dustin, how to coach. Because, you know, everyone knows what a team is and everyone knows you have to have a coach, right? And so we don't get better unless we have a coach. And the same with healthcare. And we're very proud in healthcare. We don't like to say that we don't know how to do things. So by coaching and putting standard work in place, we're allowing the leaders to grow. And we've seen that and be a little vulnerable and get that feedback that maybe they don't want to hear. But at the end, we're going to help our frontline people. And at the end, we're going to help our patients because, you know, at the end of the day, that's what matters.
For sure.
I love it, guys. I'm sure there's a lot of head nodding out there. People getting kind of excited about this. And also if I put myself in a leader's shoes who's interested and excited about doing this, I also know there's a lot of realities about the, you know, how much influence a person can have within an organization. So you're talking about this operating model, this system, and so if I am a lead of a function or a department or even a frontline manager, like give me a sense of something I can do tomorrow with this toolkit.
Sure. So I think one of the things, so if I was the director of radiology, if I was the manager over lab, I think one of the things that I would do today, don't have to even wait till tomorrow, I think today, this afternoon you could do it, is take a look and understand what goals are you trying to achieve that have been given to you as part of the system or your local ministry's expectations for the year, and how have you translated that to the front line? Are you using language that they understand? You can do that today and figure out how to start to have that conversation with them. You don't have to wait for this massive lean deployment of huddle boards, et cetera. Today, you can make that language transferable to the front line so they know the behavior. You know it anyway. It's just hard. It's been hard to figure out how to get them to do what you want. This is the language. This is what you can do today. The other thing that you can do is you can say, tomorrow morning at 9, we're all going to get together and we're going to talk about this metric. You don't even have to call it a huddle if you don't want to. It doesn't have to be this huge, impossible thing to execute on. So those are the baby steps that you can do. The other thing that I think is just huge as a leader is constantly doing that self-reflection to understand how you are helping your folks get to the point where they can apply the information that you've trained them on. And that self-reflection can be done anytime.
Absolutely. And I think, Jenny, I would add to that. I think just really looking at your priorities. Absolutely. Don't you think that, you know, people have so many competing priorities that we tell our front line, you need to measure CAUTI and CLABSI and falls and CHD bath compliance, et cetera. But really at the end of the day, what are the things that are most priority in your organization in order for you to meet your strategic goals and at the end of the day, to be able to provide the care that you need to be able to provide
Absolutely.
to your population.
Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate your
Absolutely.
guys' expertise. If you can't tell, they are super passionate about the work that they do, and I've seen it in action, and so is everyone at Tier 1 Performance. We are super excited about the work that we do. We say that we activate strategy through people, and I know that sounds a little jargony, but what it means to us is there's a big gap between a strategy and the work that gets done,
Absolutely.
and it all happens through people. We activate strategy through people, and you guys heard a little bit of great thinking. You guys, I learn from you every time I talk with you. And I want to thank the viewers, the listeners out there, the leaders who are doing good work. We appreciate all the work you're doing for taking care of our patients, our loved ones, and taking the time out of your busy schedules to be with us. You will be receiving an email with a recording of this webinar, as well as the tools that we referenced in here. If you got excited about that, or you just wanted to chat with Jenny and Jackie, I know I do, feel free to respond to the email. We would love to have coffee with you, beer with you, anything that makes sense to you. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.